To be a teacher in Ghana is often a thankless venture, and they are perhaps one of the most underappreciated workers in Ghana. But this teacher suffered an even greater injustice, an injustice that would see him spend 15 years of his life in jail for a crime he did not commit. This is the shocking case of Eric Asante and the Republic, which was pursued all the way to the Supreme Court of Ghana. In November 2003, Eric Asante was just an agric teacher at Nyohene Presby JSS in Tamale, Ghana. He had no idea that his entire world was about to crumble because of a 14-year-old student's deception. The girl, whose identity remains protected, was living with her aunt when she began complaining of severe backaches and body pains. Her family planned to take her to the hospital the next day, but what they discovered instead was sent shockwaves throughout their community. When the day came for her hospital visit, the girl was caught writing what appeared to be a love letter to someone named Mr. Eric. The contents were absolutely damning. In her own handwriting, she detailed how she had met Eric the previous day, how she had given him what he wanted, and how grateful she was for the money he had given her. She expressed her love for him and explained that she wouldn't be able to visit because she was feeling unwell. The letter read like evidence of an illicit relationship between a teacher and his minor students. When confronted about the letter, the girl didn't hesitate to identify the recipient. She pointed directly at Eric Asante, her agric teacher, claiming he was her boyfriend. The family was outraged and immediately stormed to Eric's residence, accusing him of defilement. Eric vehemently denied the accusations, but his protests fell on deaf ears. The family had already made up their minds, and they swiftly reported the matter to the police. The police issued a medical examination form, and the girl was taken to the hospital for assessment. There, she repeated her story to the doctor, again claiming that Eric was her boyfriend and that they had engaged in countless sexual encounters. The doctor, suspecting something was amiss, decided to run a pregnancy test. The results were shocking. The girl was 23 weeks pregnant. With this revelation, Eric's fate seemed sealed. He was arrested and charged with defilement, a serious crime that required the prosecution to prove that he and no one else had engaged in sexual intercourse with a girl under 16 years of age. As is typical with these cases, there was no witness to the alleged crime, so the courts relied heavily on the girl's testimony and the medical evidence of her pregnancy. The trial court was convinced by the evidence presented. They had the girl's detailed testimony, the incriminating love letter, her consistent story to medical professionals, and most damning of all, her pregnancy. Eric was found guilty and sentenced to 15 years in prison, more than twice the mandatory minimum sentence for such an offense. His life as he knew it was over. Refusing to accept this injustice, Eric appealed to the Court of Appeal, but his appeal was dismissed. Undeterred, he took his case to the highest court of the land, the Supreme Court of Ghana, filing 6 grounds of appeal. It was here that fate would finally begin to smile upon him, though justice would come at a tremendous personal cost. After filing the Supreme Court appeal, Eric's lawyers made a crucial decision that would change everything. They applied for DNA testing of the child who had been born during Eric's imprisonment. The Supreme Court granted this application, ordering the girl and her family to submit to DNA testing. However, the girl's family had no intention of complying with this order. They evaded the court's directive until contempt proceedings were brought against them, finally forcing them to comply with the DNA testing. When the DNA results came back, they were absolutely conclusive and devastating to the prosecution's case. Eric Asante was not the father of the child. The scientific evidence was crystal clear. He could not have been responsible for the pregnancy that has been the cornerstone of his conviction. But the DNA test revealed something even more troubling about the original investigation. The Supreme Court discovered that during the girl's initial medical assessment, the examining doctor had made a critical error. He had neglected to check for physical signs of sexual penetration because, in his view, the pregnancy had removed all doubts about sexual activity. This was a fundamental mistake that compromised the entire case. The problem with relying on the pregnancy was timing. The pregnancy was 23 weeks old when discovered, which meant conception had occurred months before the alleged incident on November 12, 2003. While the pregnancy confirmed that the girl had engaged in sexual activity at some point, it provided no proof whatsoever that she had been intimate with Eric on that specific date mentioned in her testimony. The DNA evidence completely destroyed the prosecution's case on the most crucial element, establishing that Eric was the perpetrator. Since Eric was not the father of the child, he could not have been responsible for any sexual relations that resulted in the pregnancy. The girl had lied under oath about one of the most fundamental aspects of her testimony. This revelation had massive implications for the girl's credibility as a witness. She had sworn an oath and testified that Eric was responsible for her pregnancy, but the DNA evidence proved this was completely false. If she was willing to lie under oath about something so significant, what else in her testimony was fabricated? Her credibility was completely destroyed, and without a credible witness, the conviction became entirely unsafe. The Supreme Court was deeply troubled by this case and issued a stern warning about the handling of sexual offences cases in the future. They emphasized that courts must exercise extreme caution and seek corroborative evidence to support accusations in such cases. They noted that stories of sexual assault and defilement are often easy to fabricate, but extremely difficult for accused persons to refute, making innocent persons vulnerable to false accusations. The Supreme Court also noted, while the original High Court had suggested there was some level of intimacy between the student and Eric, this was never actually established with credible evidence. Even the love letter written by the girl was deemed self-serving and unreliable, given her proving dishonesty under oath. The conclusion was inescapable. Eric ASANTE's conviction could not be supported by the evidence. The Supreme Court quashed his conviction, finally declaring him innocent of the charges that had destroyed his life. However, this vindication came at an unbearable cost. Eric had already served his 15-year sentence. An innocent man had lost 15 years of his life, his career, reputation, and his freedom because of a teenager's lie and a flawed investigation. The Supreme Court commended Eric's lawyer, Kwame Boni Esquire, for his resilience and dedication in pursuing justice for his client. They also made important recommendations for the future, suggesting that laws should be implemented to allow for more post-conviction DNA testing to prevent similar tragedies. In a final attempt to provide some measure of justice, Eric's lawyers invoked Article 14(7) of Ghana's 1992 Constitution, requesting that the court order compensation for Eric due to his acquittal after serving his full sentence. The Supreme Court acknowledged this request, but required Eric to make a formal application for compensation. This case serves as a powerful reminder that our justice system, while designed to protect the innocent, can sometimes fail catastrophically, destroying lives in the process. His 15 years of lost freedom can never be returned, but his case helped ensure that future defendants will have access to the scientific evidence that could prove their innocence. Follow Super Law J Studios for more real stories, real cases, real people.